I always like to give consideration to the things that we take for granted. For instance, some of the words that we use on the podcast. I get notes from you guys all the time. My favorite one very recently was, I didn't know until I was listening to the podcast for months that I was doing MDI. I mean, I knew I was injecting insulin, but I didn't know it was called multiple daily injections and that people shortened that to MDI. So I thought, you know what, that probably happens to more people than I realize. And so today is the first of our new mini episodes. They're just going to be a few minutes long. They'll happen on Fridays, and they're going to be with me and Jenny Smith as we define diabetes. I think I want to call this Defining Diabetes with Scott and Jenny. Da, 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 da. There'll be like music, and there's no music. I have no money for music. Anyway, just imagine like game show music in your head, and then I'll say the thing. So I'll give you a second. You get the game show music running. Right? Like Card Sharks or something like that. You got it going? Ready? Hey, everybody. It's Defining Diabetes with Scott and Jenny. I'm going to use this weird... I'm not talking like that. Anyway, this one's Bolus, okay? That's where we're going to start. Bolus. That seems like a good, reasonable place to start. Do you believe it or not? There are people who listen to this podcast who send me notes and say, I don't know what bolus means. So you will in a second. Hey, by the way, it means more than you think. Defining Diabetes is made possible by Dexcom, Omnipod, and Dancing for Diabetes. After Jenny and I define Bolus today, there'll be a little information about those companies. Stick around for 30 seconds and check it out. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, and to always consult a physician before becoming bold with insulin or making any changes to your medical plan. Jenny, let's define bolus. You go first.
Bolus. I go first.
Yeah.
So bolus is... That's the easy way to define it. Bolus is a one-time, right now, dose of insulin that's given for two reasons. One, either to cover food or to correct and bring a high blood sugar down. So it's whether you inject it or you do it with your pump, it is an amount of insulin that you give right now. It's not something that lingers like a basal insulin would.
And it's also, outside of diabetes, a real medical word that would be used that has nothing to do with insulin. And it just means to infuse liquid, right? Or something like that. Isn't that the actual, hold on a second. Watch this, Jenny.
Definition of bolus.
Definition. I'm going to look it up on the internet. A small rounded mass of a substance, especially of chewed food, that's weird, at the moment of swallowing. A type of large pill used in a veterinarian medicine. Here we go. Here's the one for us. A single dose of a drug or other medicinal preparation given all at once.
All at once. And part of the reason that bolus came into use with diabetes is because of the initial known definition is that it's that small mass of like food that you chew up and that goes down your throat. It's called a bolus.
Really?
So when you take insulin for food, it's almost like you're bolusing because you're bolusing a single dose of a drug, insulin, to cover an amount of food, a bolus of food.
Jenny, you're so smart. You don't want to miss the Diabetes Pro Tips series that Jenny and I did recently. It begins back at episode 210 with Diabetes Pro Tip, Newly Diagnosed or Starting Over. After that, it's episode 211, all about MDI. Episode 212, all about insulin. In episode 217, we talk about pre-bolusing. In 218, temp basiling. In 219, insulin pumping. In 224, mastering your CGM. In 225, bumping and nudging. In 226, the perfect bolus. And in 231, we talk about variables. That series is ongoing. Do not miss it, and it's designed to be listened to in order. Even if you're not doing MDI, check out the MDI episode. Start at Newly Diagnosed and Starting Over. Listen through. I guarantee you're going to love them. Defining Diabetes on the Juicebox Podcast is brought to you by Dexcom, Omnipod, and Dancing for Diabetes. There are links in the show notes and at juiceboxpodcast.com to all the wonderful sponsors. But if you want to find out more about getting a free, no-obligation demo of the Omnipod, you can go to myomnipod.com/juicebox. To get started on the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor, dexcom.com/juicebox. And to learn about the good that's being done at Dancing for Diabetes, go to dancing4diabetes.com. Thanks for checking out Defining Diabetes. Come back every Friday as Jenny and I break down a new word or phrase that is impacting your life with type 1 diabetes.